So I'm looking at Justin Herbert's numbers, looking at where he ranks comparatively in the deep passing area. He was second in completions. He was 32 of 70 with a 45.7 completion percentage and 119 NFL passer rating. If you look at the intermediate passing area, he's 10th. If you sort it by first downs, he had 72. Lamar Jackson had 88. He only had 6 touchdowns in the intermediate area, and Lamar Jackson had 19. If you look at the top pass catchers in the intermediate area, considering first downs, Ladd McConkey is first with 37. If you look at Baltimore, they kind of have a better disparity of pass catchers. They have Zay Flowers at 13, Mark Andrews at 23, Rashad Bateman at 33. And if you look at some of the better teams, they have tight ends with a large amount of first downs. San Francisco has George Kittle. Washington has Zach Ertz. Kansas City has Travis Kelce. Arizona has Trey McBride. If you look at the deep passing area, Joshua Palmer was first in terms of first downs with 8, 1 touchdown. He was 8 for 18, 44.4 reception percentage. Herbert did miss a few passes to him deep. He makes those catches. That number probably goes up. Quick QJ is second, 26 overall. He was 7 of 24, 4 touchdowns, 7 first downs. Ladd McConkey's third, 38th overall, 6 of 12, 3 touchdowns, 6 first downs. If you look at Baltimore, they have Rashad Bateman 11th overall. He had 10 first downs, 6 touchdowns. If you look at, and Zay Flowers is tied for 20th with 8 first downs, 1 touchdown, 8 for 21. So in terms of deep passing, Josh Palmer was our best pass catcher in terms of first downs. Yards per route reception receiving was 13.8. QJ's was 9.79, and Ladd McConkey's was 21.75. And I'll explain that in better detail in a second, and why a higher number doesn't necessarily mean that wide receiver is better. So again, Josh Palmer's 13, QJ's 9, Ladd is 21. So if you go to college, the deep passing area, and just looking at tight ends, you have Holden Willis at 10 first downs, Rondé Gadsden at 9, Harold Fannin Jr. at 9, Elijah Arroyo at 9 or 8, and then so on and so forth. Gunnar Helm had 5, Tyler Warren had 5. You look at missed tackles forced, which is the next column over to the left from the first downs. Holden Willis had 4, Harold Fannin Jr. had 4. In terms of contested catch, Rondé Gadsden was 4 for 6 in the deep area. Tyler Warren was 5 of 6. If you look at yards per reception ran, Mason Taylor, LSU, had a 7.27. Tyler Warren was at 12. Colson Loveland was at 12. If you look at reception percentage, Rondé Gadsden had 103 targets and a 69% reception percentage, 9 of 13. Harold Fannin had 150, 52%, 9 of 17. Tyler Warren had 135, 55%, 5 of 9. If you look at the intermediate area, just considering tight ends, Tyler Warren was first with 25. Harold Fannin second, 24. Rondé Gadsden, 21. Holden Willis, 15. Gunnar Helm, 12. Tyler Warren, Harold Fannin, Rondé Gadsden all had over 100 yards targeted. Harold Fannin, Tyler Warren had 65 and 70% reception percentage. If you look at missed tackles forced, Harold Fannin had 3, Rondé Gadsden had 3. In terms of contested catch percentage, Harold Fannin was 6 of 7, Rondé Gadsden was 5 of 6. In terms of short passing area, if you're looking at tight ends and halfbacks, Harold Fannin had 28 first downs, Tyler Warren 25, Mace Taylor 24, Terrence Ferguson 18. Missed tackles forced, Harold Fannin had 12, Tyler Warren had 11, Gunnar Helm out of Texas had 10. One person that kind of pops out is LaQuint Allen, halfback out of Syracuse. He's being considered as a great pass blocking halfback, and if you look at how they played, they used a lot of spread. If you look at the short passing area, considering wide receivers and tight ends, Jack Endries out of Cal, his numbers kind of pop out. He was 93% reception percentage, only 61 targets, 40 of 43, and 24 first downs, which is 11th best considering he only had 61 targets. That's really good. Nick Nash had 23 missed tackles forced, which is double than the second next guy. 36 first downs, the most. I know offensively they like to use tight ends, but considering we might need more intermediate help, some of these guys, wide receivers that are good in the intermediate area, could be of great help to the Chargers if they go more of a light personnel package and could help get wide receivers open in the intermediate area. That would probably mean that they need to do more spread, light package. In terms of receiving depth in short area, considering just halfbacks, LaQuint Allen had the most first downs at 17, and then Michael Dukes out of Georgia State had 5 missed tackles forced, 9 first downs. Lincoln Pear out of Texas State had 7 missed tackles forced, 7 first downs. downs. Josh Williams, LSU, had 7 missed tackles forced, 5 first downs. Lincoln Pear out of Texas State, he was also 10 for 10. Michael Dukes was 19 of 20. If you're looking at the intermediate area receiving depth, considering wide receivers and tight ends, Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State had the most at first downs at 31. He was also 7 of 10 in contested catches. Next was Dymere Miller out of Rutgers, 28. Tyler Warren, Harold Fannin have the most considering wide receivers as well at 4 and 7. Xavier Restrepo had 7 missed tackles forced, 22 first downs. Jack Besh, 7 missed tackles forced, 21 first downs. Kyron Lacey was 48% reception percentage, 5 touchdowns, 21 first downs. Looking at deep area, considering wide receivers and tight ends, Darius Cooper out of Tarleton, wide receiver, had 24 first downs. Jalen Knoll out of Iowa State had 14 first downs. It's also 6 of 10 in contested catches. The only tight end I see out of this list is Holden Willis out of Middle Tennessee, 10 of 18, 55%, 10 first downs, 4 missed tackles forced. Nick Nash has a 10 yards per reception per route ran. If you're looking at deep, just considering tight ends, Gunnar Helm out of Texas has a perfect passer rating of 158.3, 5 first downs, 3 touchdowns, 100% reception percentage, 5 for 5. Does have a low drop rating, but no drops. Sam Olsen out of Arizona has a perfect passer rating of 158.3, 4 first downs, 2 touchdowns, 4 for 4. Rondé Gatson, 9 of 13, 9 first downs, 151 passer rating. Tyler Warren, 140 passer rating, 6 of 5 contested catches, 5 of 9 reception percentage, 55. Harold Fannin, Holden Willis, Rondé Gatson, Elijah Arroyo all have 8 or more receptions. And I was just curious if there was a quarterback who had a low accuracy percentage or adjusted percentage, which is your accuracy considering negating drops from the wide receivers. And one name that kind of popped out to me was Clyde Klubnik. He had the second highest adjusted percentage considering quarterbacks with a large amount of attempts. He does have a 6'3" wide receiver, but he didn't really have a lot of wide receivers that are popping out in terms of production. If you consider YPRR, or yards per route ran, or yards per reception per route ran, I don't think a higher number necessarily means a better wide receiver. PFF did a little article on it considering that YPRR has a high correlation to fantasy football points, and fantasy football points are based off reception yards, so the higher reception yards you have, the higher fantasy football points you have. So that makes sense. I don't know if it necessarily has anything to do with your snaps en route, but if you think about it, if you have higher number of reception yards and a lower amount of snaps en route, you're going to have a higher YPRR. But what does that mean? It means that you were really only used in passing situations, or it could mean that when you were in, you were effective in catching the ball, or maybe you were the only featured wide receiver in terms of reception. If you look at Tyreek Hill, he has a 2.35, which is kind of middle of all these wide receivers, and we all know he's a good wide receiver. So what that tells me is he was willing to run a lot and may not have had as many reception yards, and therefore he had a lower YPRR. Does that mean he's a lesser wide receiver than Julio Jones or Antonio Brown or Keenan Allen or DeAndre Hopkins? Not necessarily. It just means maybe the ball was spread out more and he was not necessarily the only featured wide receiver in that offense. So I don't necessarily think a higher YPRR means you're a better wide receiver. I think actually the inverse could be true, is that you are willing to run a lot, maybe not get featured as much, and are kind of unselfish in helping your other teammates get open. So if you look at AJ Green down at the bottom, he had over 1,000 yards reception, but his YPRR is 2.09 with Cincinnati. And why is that? Because they run a spread, they throw a lot. A lot of the receivers are running a lot, and they're not always necessarily catching the ball. That doesn't mean he's a bad receiver. So I'm looking at the wide receivers in college in accordance of YRR. You have Deontay Thornton at the top. So what that tells me is that he only had 34 targets, says 7 receptions on 34 targets, 70%. So they didn't target him a lot, but when they did, he was productive. 376 yards, 53 or 70% reception, 7 first downs, and this was in the deep area. He had 3 TDs. The other person whose numbers have been popping out to me are Trey Harris, 5 TDs, 9 of 16, 56%, 24 YRR. Jalen Knoll, 14 first downs. Elijah Surratt at Indiana, 12 first downs. Jalen Knoll also had 119 targets in the deep area, 14 of 25, 56%, 609 yards. Jalen Knoll also was 6 for 10 in contested catches, 60%. Reed Harris, he's only tight end. He's not draft eligible, but he was 4 for 4 in contested catches, 8 first downs. touchdowns in the deep area as a tight end, 4 touchdowns. In terms of passer rating, Isaac Tesla was among those who had a perfect, as well as Jaden Greathouse out of Notre Dame, Nick Marsh of Michigan State, Rondé Gatson had a 151 passer rating in the deep area, 4 of 6 contested catches, 3 touchdowns, 9 of 13. Justin Jolly, 6 of 9, 2 touchdowns, 6 first downs, 149 passer rating. Elijah Surratt, Jalen Royals, Utah State, Trey Harris, Ole Miss, Jalen Noel, Iowa State, Jacoby Lane out of USC, Colonel Tate, Ohio State, Tyler Warren, Penn State, Xavier Strepo. If you look at rushing grades, looking at receptions overall, LaQuint Allen had the most at 64, 56 elusive rating. Cam Scattaboo had a 139 elusive rating, 34 grade in pass block though, 44-52. Yards after contact, 4. Amarian Hampton had a 4.35. Yards after contact, only 48 pass block grade, 126 elusive rating. Ashton Genty had a 5.25 yards after contact, only 46 pass block rating, 215 elusive rating though. Shoal Fison out of Utah State had a 127 elusive rating. RJ Harvey had a 122 elusive rating. Corey Kiner had a 4 yards after contact per attempt, 161 elusive rating at Cincinnati. So having said all that, the Chargers weren't very productive in the intermediate area, but you have to consider why that was. It was because they did a lot of play action, a lot of balls thrown deep, 13% to be exact. In the intermediate area, they were 23%. So my opinion is that they need to be more productive in the intermediate area. Only 72 first downs, only 6 touchdowns compared to Lamar Jackson, Baltimore 19, Joe Burrow 12, Baker Mayfield 12, Jaden Daniels 12. And was that because we needed more tight ends to stay in and block, to do more play action in order to throw the ball deep? So does that mean we need better line blocking so that we don't have to dedicate tight ends or extra eligible receivers to stay in and block? Or does it mean we need a better weapon in the intermediate area, a la a wide receiver or a tight end? I think if they had Errol Fannin as a fullback, kind of like how they used him in the Senior Bowl, and then another tight end that's a pass catching weapon, that could be a pretty dynamic pass offense. But considering how bad our run blocking was, as well as our run game overall, that definitely probably needs to be more of a priority.